I hereby call the Norwood City Council meeting to order. Please rise for the prayer and the pledge of allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, as a body we congregate in this council chamber, we pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Here.
Mr. Gabbard.
Here.
Mr. Geraci.
Here.
Mr. Kelch.
Here.
Mr. DiNardo.
Here.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Braden.
Here.
All members present. Item E, amendment of agenda. We have nothing to add this evening. That brings us to item F, minutes of previous meeting for January 9th, 2020. Mr. Thompson?
Move we accept the
Minutes.
document.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Braden?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch. Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item G, requests to address council on agenda items. We have Mr. Aftab Peerval, Hamilton County Clerk of Courts. Sir. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Council members, thank you so much for giving me a few minutes. I'm Aftab Peerval. I'm the Clerk of Courts for Hamilton County. I wanted to give you an update on the court functions currently and throughout the pandemic. First and foremost, it's important to know that the courthouse never closed. The courthouse did, however, suspend specific hearings and jury trials based on some guidance that the courthouse got from the Supreme Court and from the governor. All of those administrative orders suspending some specific matters, specifically jury trials, have actually been lifted. So now at the courthouse, we are so to speak, business as usual. There are some fundamental changes that you should be aware of before you come to the courthouse. First and foremost, if you have business at the courthouse, if you have a pending matter, it's important that you reach out to the judge that it's before, because a lot of judges are doing hearings via Zoom. I know Zoom is the bane of our existence, but it's been useful to make sure that the courthouse continues to move. So please do reach out. And that's a message not just to you, but also to your constituents. Reach out to the judge and see how they want to proceed. You'll also be required to wear a mask inside the building. You won't be allowed in unless you have a doctor's note saying that you don't have to wear a mask. The sheriff's deputies will stop you. And also there will be a touchless temperature that's taken for everyone entering the courthouse or the justice system. So just keep that stuff in mind as you come to the courthouse. We are business as usual. All of the clerk of court's offices are open and have been open since the very beginning of the pandemic. Really proud of the public servants working there, so much so that we've recently instituted a hero bonus to our clerk of court's employees. Everyone working in the courthouse under my authority is making an additional $1 or $2 per hour because of the risks that they face every single day dealing with the public. And in some instances, particularly our bailiffs transporting inmates, they don't have the luxury of social distancing. Let me leave you with some information about evictions. That seems to be the hot topic these days. Certainly I'm getting a lot of calls and emails about it. The eviction rate in Hamilton County, so it's important to know first that the municipal court in Hamilton County suspended eviction hearings, I think in about March. And the eviction hearing suspension was lifted at the beginning of, I believe it was June. And so there was some residents were under the misunderstanding that because the court had suspended evictions, that the landlords still could not file an eviction, and that was not true. The landlords could still file an eviction, it would just be pending and just be in a queue until the eviction hearings were restarted. They were restarted in June. We had over 1,000 eviction cases pending at that time. The court is currently working through those pending evictions. Right now, the last time I checked, there were about 800 evictions still pending in the queue, so it's taking a little time to get through them. And part of the reason it's taking so long is because they've taken the eviction docket that used to be just one docket and split it into 3 separate dockets to make the folks showing up to the courthouse less in number, so that they could maintain the 6 feet distance. So now, instead of being in the courthouse, the eviction hearings are held in the Justice Center in a much larger courtroom. They're capped at 25 cases per day for 3 dockets, so 75 in total. So there's fewer eviction cases being heard. So actually, counterintuitively, from March until June, because of that misunderstanding, we actually saw less eviction cases filed as compared to a year earlier, something like 30% less. Those numbers have since gone up, and they've gone up because the federal benefit of the $600 unemployment and also the federal moratorium on evictions from the CARES Act expired a couple weeks ago. And so those numbers continue to climb. Now, the president enacted his executive order on evictions. CMHA here locally has said that they will not pursue evictions. CMHA is the largest public housing authority in Hamilton County. They will not pursue evictions until September. And hopefully Congress will act. But there's a lot of landlords and tenants who are hurting right now. So 2 things for you to be aware of. Hamilton County committed $5 million to emergency rental assistance. The city of Cincinnati committed $300,000. I've set up an eviction help center for both landlords and tenants in the justice system, where either the landlord or the tenant can go there free of charge without the need for an attorney and apply for and hopefully get fast-tracked for these funds. It's important to know that this eviction crisis is not the fault of the landlords, it's not the fault of the tenants, it's the fault of this pandemic. And so we're trying to do everything that we can to make sure that landlords get the back rent that they're due, and hopefully tenants can stay in their home. Because particularly at a time when public health experts are telling us to stay home, if at all possible, if you don't have a home, the homeless shelters right now are full in Cincinnati. That creates a public health issue for all of us. So check out our website, cincyhelpcenter.org. If you have questions or if you want to direct landlords or tenants, that's where they can get the help that they need. That was a lot of very specific information about the courts. So if anyone has any questions, I'll take them now. Okay, great. Well, stunned you into silence. I've done my job. Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Pastor James.
Pastor Sonny James, 1830 Hopkins Avenue, here in beautiful Norwood, Ohio. First, let me extend a warm thank you to have. It's always, as usual, good to see you, and good to see good folks doing good work. I wanted to address recently, there was the Economic Development Committee meeting, and I was very honored to be in the presence of some of our city leaders addressing some of our economic issues of sort. I want to make sure that as we move forward, that we also intentionally, deliberately, without bias or excuse, when we say economic development, that we also include the phrase economic inclusion, that we can position ourselves as a people. And when I say as a people, I'm saying as one people. We are all brothers and sisters walking together, trying to live together. But in this day and age, it is so important that everyone hears the same language that has a universal appeal. So I do applaud a lot of the things that are, a lot of the committees, a lot of the work that's coming into the committees. But again, I want to encourage us not to shy away from terms like inclusion, because when it comes to people like myself, it's not only good enough to think you all are thinking for me and about me and in my best interest, but it makes people feel good when they can hear you say it out of your mouth. So God bless you. Continue to press forward. Thank you, because I did make an error when you had asked, and I do appreciate that very much. God bless you all.
Thank you, Pastor James. Moving on to item H, reports of standing committees of council. Economic Development Committee report.
Economic Development Report dated 8/5/20 to the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio. We, your Economic Development, to whom was referred murals, beg leave to submit the following report. The committee met and heard from a few citizens that were both for and against murals. The committee then went through a draft ordinance that Mr. Thompson had drafted. Discussion was made about, and additions/changes were addressed. Amended ordinance draft was sent to the Law Department. Respectfully submitted Michael Gabbard, Chairperson, James Bonzel, and Eric Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Bonzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that this committee report be received and filed.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzel. Mr. Braden.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, motion passes. Moving on to item I, third readings, we don't have any this evening. Second readings, item J, we do not have any, so we'll move on to item K, introductory readings of ordinances. Item K1, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement and/or Local Transportation Improvement Programs, and to execute contracts as required and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson. I'm sorry, Mr. Bonzel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we suspend the rules and have all three readings of this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Mr. Kelch. Second. Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion?
Do we have the Safety Service Director come talk
Mr.
and
Murphy?
explain a little bit? Yeah.
Mr. Murphy?
Good evening, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Basically, what this is a form that allows us to participate when it's time to enter into these programs. It's just a formality. It's like joining. You have to join in order to get participation and involve ourselves. A lot of what we're finding, the city didn't participate in, and Mr. Perry's finding many programs where in order to join on to do it, you've got to sign up to say, I want to do it. If you don't, then you're out of the loop as far as grants and funding and knowing what projects are coming towards the city that we can benefit from. Not all we can, but in order to be on the list, you have to join to do it. So that's basically what that is.
Mr. DiNardo.
Just as a follow-up, and I kind of read a little bit of the back, but this is simply saying we want to join some sort of listserv or
Right.
something like that. It's not that you have a specific
No.
opportunity in front of you.
It's
Okay.
what to know. When I dealt with ODOT grants before in the police department, there's many funding bodies that do grants, and just because you go to one doesn't mean you get all of them. They kind of sit, or you've got to go find out by going to conferences and find out what is out there that the city could benefit from that we don't know about unless you go, like in Ohio, it's a small conference, Saving More Ohio Lives. You have to go to that to see. You go to the conference and there's different state groups like yourselves, each one representing something that you don't know about till you go and find out, oh, there's money for the seatbelt dummy program, and there's also money to get the state to paint buckle up signs and put free signs up on your municipal parking lots.
Yeah.
The seatbelt dummy grant, people aren't going to tell you that. You got to go and smooth, of course, and you pay the dues for the convention to learn that, yes, there's money out there that we have to go get. They're not going to come knock on your door for it. Similar program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Any other questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all three readings?
Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs, and to execute contracts as required and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs, and to execute contracts as required and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs, and to execute contracts as required and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to pass the ordinance. Mr. Braden.
I'll second that. Thank you.
There's a second by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item K2, ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance Section 1321.01, prohibited signs to allow certain types of signs in a major planned unit development. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we have all three readings of this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to have all three readings. Mr. Braden.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Discussion. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this ordinance came about essentially pretty quickly after the Planning Commission meeting on Wednesday. The applicant for the planned unit development at the playing card company site is here, Nick Lingenfelter, and then Colleen Reynolds is here as well, who is representing him. So if we do want to talk to them, we definitely can. But this came about because, they asked at that meeting essentially like, hey, so what's going on with the, we have a video board here. We want to make sure that we're going to be able to get that there. Or I think the mayor might have brought it up. Either way. But it was brought up that right now Planning Commission, even if they wanted to, they could not approve a video board as part of the final plan for a planned unit development. Even if they wanted to, because right now our sign code prohibits certain things that would kind of count towards that video board. And so essentially what this is doing, this is allowing just in planned unit development districts that are greater than 10 acres, these illuminated signs or signs that make noise, as long as the illumination is shielded and no direct light is cast onto properties or streets that are adjacent to the final plan area. So it's essentially just empowering the Planning Commission to look at a video board or video screen in the context of an overall development and decide whether, again, that they do want to approve that or not. It's not saying that this can be allowed anywhere. So, and the reason just for the urgency is that the applicant, they're trying to get their architecture together, their site plans, everything together. And if for some reason, and having this done helps kind of reassure them, because if for some reason they can't do a video screen in the location that they want with the activity lawn, then they might have to actually change their site layout because there may not be as much relevance to the activity lawn without the screen. I mean, it's essentially Fountain Square without the screen there. The screen really enhances Fountain Square. So it's kind of the same thing that's going to be here. So the long story short, that's that. If the council would like to hear, if we would like to hear from Nick about it, I'm open to that if you want to do that, Mr. President. Do you all have any comments you all want to make?
Hey everyone, thanks for having us. Colleen Reynolds with DSD Advisors here on behalf of PLK Communities, the master developer for the playing card site. I think Councilman Bonzel summed it up pretty well, but essentially we're just looking for some sort of approval from you guys, whatever form that may take, to be able to activate our video board as we move forward. We'll be before you in, I think, about a month on the 22nd of September for our approval of the official concept PUD. But before we engage our architects and move forward, we'll actually be before you in 2 weeks from now to give a formal presentation of the site plan. We just wanted to bring this to your attention, raise it, answer any questions, if there needs to be a vote tonight or in the future. Really just wanted to get the conversation started so that way you guys kind of could hear from us. In a time of COVID and social distancing and a pandemic, obviously utilizing outdoor space is super important. We think that'll be the case for quite a while, but we really want this space to feel like an active community. We're super excited about that. If you've tuned into any of the Planning Commission conversations that we've had, this is really about creating a sense of community for our residents and your constituents here in Norwood, but also folks who come and visit and want to stay, watch a Reds game, a concert, really enjoy that outdoor space. So we've been following a little bit of your conversations around murals. We're really excited to, engage around public art. You'll see that in our designs that we'll share with you in 2 weeks. But specifically with the video board, it seems that we needed some sort of text amendment or ordinance or whatever it is that you guys tell us that will help us move that forward. So the mayor asked some great questions while we were at Planning Commission. I know he can speak to our kind of dialogue as well, but we thought we'd go ahead and get the conversation started. So we hope for a vote tonight of support, but if that's not the case, that's okay. We know this is coming to you very quickly, so we're just here to answer questions. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Mr. Gabbard? Did you raise your hand?
questions.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Mr. Bonsall, second by Mr. Braden, to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. Any further discussion? Mr. Gabbard?
Just further discussion. This is a great project that we got coming here, and I know there's going to be some things that are time sensitive. I would just be very, very cautious on how we go about doing things like this. And the reason I'm saying that is, I don't want there to be any stains on this project where there's any improprieties. Something like this should be going through committee first before it comes to council. I understand we have some time restrictions and stuff like that. I just don't want there to be any type of stain. This is going to be an outstanding project for Norwood, and I don't want there to be any type of stains. So any of these kind of things, just to have one single council person, work with the developer and bring it up and it not go through any committees, could be looked at. I know that there wasn't, and I'm not suggesting or implying that there was any type of underhandedness here at all. I'm just saying, for further reference, we should be very cautious on how we do these things, just so there's no stains on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Anyone else? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I guess I would just kind of push back on that because I think there is an implication there that potentially if a council member watches a planning commission meeting and then talks to the mayor after the planning commission meeting, and the mayor's on board with, let's go ahead and get just the ability for the planning commission to even be able to allow the video board, that somehow there's impropriety there. I just want to, and I know that that's probably not the intention of the previous council member, but I do just want to say that I think that I could push back, because if there's a park that somebody wants and a council member brings up an ordinance for, to name a park after somebody, do you think that, could there be some impropriety there? Essentially, I'm concerned at the implication there. I'm fine if we want to put this into a committee. I think I'd be okay with that as long as the, whatever committee we put it in, that committee chair will address it quickly. But I really don't see a huge issue here, just in the sense that we are basically allowing the planning commission to allow that in a final PUD, and a final PUD will come to council as well. So there's no guarantee that anything will actually be allowed, but it essentially empowers the powers that be to let it happen if they so want to. So I just want to, again, just emphasize there's no impropriety that was here. It was essentially me watching the planning commission meeting and seeing an issue and saying, look, let's just get this addressed quickly so that.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I can't hear you. I don't understand what you're saying. I'm trying to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I will try to talk louder to it, but yeah, so again, I'm just to finish my point, I mean, again, I just don't like the suggestion there. If the rest of the council wants to put it into a committee, I think that's fine, but the whole point of bringing it tonight was just to take action, to get stuff done, so that we're not just sitting on things, and that's why I brought it. So with that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Gabbard?
Yeah, like I said, this wasn't to accuse or anything like that. I'm using this as a CYA. The difference between someone naming a park after somebody, which that was in committee and came out of that committee to that, and working with a private developer, there's a big difference there. And that's what I'm saying. It could be construed as such, and I don't want that to happen to any of us, including the person that brought this. And so I'm not directing it to say you did or that there's any type of wrongdoing here. I'm just saying, let's make sure that we're careful about these things, and knowing that there's time-sensitive things on here, then I would think that if it was put in a committee that and said, hey, we got to get a committee on this ASAP so we can get it for the thing, we could have maybe met over the weekend or something like that. There's going to be times when things like that happen, but I'm just, again, just for a precautionary reason, I'm not trying to point a finger or say anybody did anything. There's no implications here. This is just strictly a warning of CYA for all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. I saw a hand over here. Mr. Thompson, sir.
I have a question for the law director.
Yes, sir.
Just, if you could clarify how this is different from existing sign code?
Sure. Basically, I got an email Thursday from Mr. Bonzel asking, hey, what can we do to get a big video screen in there? And taking a look at the code, it basically, something that's flashing, something that's got video on it that does sound is just banned. It's just not permitted. So what I did, and to be honest, like the dimensions and whatever's in there is just what I thought. That seems reasonable to me. I just came up with something because we needed to get them to the packets Friday morning. And my thinking was, okay, this kind of thing, we don't want it next to somebody's house. That's why. We don't want it on Montgomery Road to distract people as they're driving. And so the purposes of the sign code, we don't want that. We don't want those kinds of signs. There's a whole list of things that we don't want. And basically all I did was add subsection B to this. It says within a PUD, which means it goes through the Planning Commission, it comes to council, there's public hearings for both, it's a long drawn-out process, it involves, with 10 acres or more, it's a large piece of property, which is then kind of separate from any place else. Because if you have anything else in the sign code, you're basically saying, oh, in a commercial general business district, I could put this up here. So if that happens if I put a billboard up here on Montgomery, one of the buildings on Montgomery Road, there's people whose houses are right behind that. So there's a difference. And I think within the context of a planned unit development, all of those kinds of factors can be taken into account because you're looking at this large development, multi-building, multi-use kind of thing. But that's what I came up with. And the building department, I have no idea. Mr. Bonzel tells me that PLK this works for what they want. But that's where it came from. I got something together because we wanted it on the agenda. And I'll also mention that Mr. Gary added an emergency clause, and I said, no, we don't need an emergency clause. And the logic there is it's going to be, 6 weeks before we have the preliminary PUD plan in front of council. And that basically just shows where the buildings are and how big they are. Any signage has to be in the final PUD plan. Which still has to go to the planning. If they submitted a final plan with signage in it today, we would be at probably maybe Thanksgiving before that was actually in front of council. So there's really no vital need for this to actually go into effect immediately instead of waiting 30 days after it's signed by the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Thompson.
Just one quick follow-up question, too, just for clarity. And what this does is it allows the planning commission right now, because of our city's laws, can't even allow this to happen because it's just across the board, no signs like this. But what this does would allow them to make that decision. They still could say yes or no. We're not granting permission here for them to put up, a sign. What we're doing is we're granting the planning commission permission to potentially allow that.
Correct, and the planning commission can put restrictions on it. Say, okay, you can have this here, but if you do that, then you can't build this next to it, or you can't put this over here, or there's got to be this much space that does whatever else
Right.
to accommodate that. And so, within the context, within the authority of the planning commission, and then when it comes to council, for council to do it as well, to put other conditions on it in order to make sure that what can be a problem with the sign will not be a problem here, but will fit in with the overall large development that's going on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Tracy?
Through the chair to Law. I see on here that it talks about illumination on section B, however, it does not state anything about audible. It doesn't have any verbiage as far as audio. Is that something that we're going to have to amend this later, at a later date, to include the audio? Because some of these ordinances up in A state, signs which emit audible sound, odor, visible matter. But section B doesn't have anything about audible tones.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, the way it's written, and I did it in a little bit of lawyering, so you got to go back, and you got to jump back and forth between different things. But basically, it says that the types of signs listed in, and it lists some of the subsections, and those would be animated, intensely lighted signs, flashing signs, signs which emit audible sound, odor, or visible matter, and signs which operate or employ any stereo, opticon, or motion picture projection or media, or have visible moving parts, or any portion of which moves or gives the illusion of motion, that those are the ones in the forbidden list that can be allowed in a PUD as part of a plan that covers at least 10 acres. So the animated signs, the signs that make noise, the signs that have, screens on them, those are allowed under this, subject to approval as part of the PUD plan.
Mr. Tracy?
Okay, just a quick follow-up to him. So that doesn't have to be spelled out, I guess it's just assumed within that that's allowed?
Mr. Moore?
Well, that's the language in subsection B is within a major planned unit development in conformance with the purposes contained in 132101, which is the purpose section of the sign code. The types of signs listed in A2, A4, A9, and A15 may be allowed, and those are the ones, A2 is animated, A9 is signs which have sound, odor, or visible matter, and 15 are stereo, opticon, or motion picture. So it's within this subsection, the ones directly listed above. But because those four are allowed, then all the rest of them, like abandoned signs, the planning commission can't approve. Pole signs, the planning commission cannot approve. So I pulled out the ones that I thought were most applicable and allow them within this context.
All right,
I think that's what I wrote. If anybody says in there, I have a not and I shouldn't, or I should have a not and I don't, we can fix that. But it looked right to me when I did it.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Brady?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to just say that I appreciate Councilman Gabbert's comments, and I think that they probably hold merit here tonight. So, in saying that, we have a major development, and we should be very excited about that. And so, I'm prepared to support this, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate the comments, and I really believe that they probably hold merit. So, I wanted to get that out there, but I probably will support this and move this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Any other comments? Mr. Gabbard?
Just for a point of clarity, I'm all for this, and I'm all for this development. I don't want there to be anybody misconstrue that, and we should be looking at all these different types of things. Just a question through to, I'm not sure if it's maybe the mayor, he's there, no. Do we already have an agreement with them, a redevelopment agreement with PLK set up?
Mr. Mayor?
No, we're not in a position, we do not have a redevelopment agreement in place that puts us, that's the process they're going through, is putting this in place.
Okay.
The whole idea behind this, and the reason why, when Councilman Bonzo talked to me about this, is that the city is open for business. That when developers come here, we want to make sure that we are knocking down barriers to move them forward, to get things going, to make sure that they know that. This is a very small component, very small. But this is a huge step for the city of Norwood to tell this developer, hey, we're with you, let's keep moving. They've got good momentum. Let's not do it, we don't want to do anything to stop it. And that's really what this is all about, is one very small step to make sure that they keep on track and they keep moving as forward as quickly as possible, so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dracy?
I will agree with Mr. Gabbard on his statements, but I also kind of disagree with the mayor on the statement of we need to let people know we're open for business, because we still need to go through the process. We can't do this every single time a major development comes up because something doesn't conform with what they're wanting to do. Now, most people know that I've been to the playing card company and had discussions about what's going on, and I'm excited probably more than anybody, just being there firsthand. And I think we got to watch ourselves and make sure that we're not doing the same things in the future and trying to jump the gun and make it seem like we're playing favorites for certain areas.
Thank you, Mr. Dracy. Any other comments? Any further discussion? The motion on the floor by Mr. Bonsall, that was second by Mr. Braden, to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo? Yes. Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all three readings, please?
Ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance, Section 1321.07, prohibited signs, to allow certain types of signs in a major planned unit development. Ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance, Section 1321.07, prohibited signs, to allow certain types of signs in a major planned unit development. Ordinance amending Norwood Codified Ordinance, Section 1321.07, prohibited signs, to allow certain types of signs in a major planned unit development.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Gabbard.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gabbard. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the ordinance passes. Moving on to item K3, ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Indian Mound Street Improvements Project, Ohio Public Works Commission Project Number CB06X/B07X, JMA number 4138, within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Geraci.
Make a motion to suspend the rules and have all three readings.
Motion by Mr. Geraci to suspend the rules and have all three readings. May I have a second? Mr. Bonsall.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bonsall. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all three readings, please?
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Indian Mound Street Improvements Project, Ohio Public Works Commission Project Number CB06X/B07X, JMA number 4138, within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Indian Mound Street Improvement Project, Ohio Public Works Commission Project Number CB06X/B07X, JMA Number 4138, within the City of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Indian Mound Street Improvements Project, Ohio Public Works Commission Project Number CB06X/B07X, JMA Number 4138, within the City of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Thompson?
Move we pass the amendment or the
Motion.
ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Thompson. May I have a second? Mr. DiNardo. Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, motion passes. Item K4, ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for 2020 paving improvements to Cathedral Avenue and Shanmore Avenue, JMA number 4191, within the City of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson.
Move we have all three readings.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Mr. Braden.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
I'm just curious, maybe a question to the mayor or even the Safety Service Director on how we are selecting streets.
I'll take that.
Mr. Mayor.
Right now, the street selection is the streets that were selected by previous councils over the previous years. So in the future, we hope to utilize the street survey, but right now, this is information, or these streets were in the financial recovery plan, and they're considered terrible streets, so we're taking care of them.
Mr. Gabbard.
To follow up, the reason I said that is because I wanted the public to hear from you that we're not paving or looking to pave my street just because I live on it. I'm like past council members, you always are concerned that, that council person got his street paved, but what about mine? And so these are streets that were selected prior councils. We're good to go. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
The cathedral was actually slated to be repaved back in 2003, and it was not done at that time, and the money was sent back because the previous administration didn't want to do it at that time. We didn't have the wherewithal to get it done. So now we're in that position. So it's a street that was supposed to be paved almost 16 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Bonzo.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask specifically on payment. So we have grants for the Indian Mound Street Improvement Project, or at least we have grants that I know of for those. I was just curious on number 4, even though we do definitely have the funds in our street fund to do it, was there like grants or something else that we got to help with part of that as well, or is that just going to be paid cash out of the street fund?
Well, I'll defer to the Safety Service Director on that since he's here.
Mr. Murphy.
And I can re-ask the question if you didn't hear it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mayor, Mr. Bonzo, could you repeat the question?
I'd be happy to, sorry. So the question was, even though we do have the funds in our street fund to pay for this, are we anticipating using all of using Fund 2 to pay for it? Or will there also be some grants that will go into this project as well?
We have $700,000 in the capital improvement budget, which will cover our portion of this, is my understanding. Some of it, especially with Indian Mound, how many catchments we have to replace based on the damage will play into that. We can't go over it, obviously, but if we're going to do the whole program with a grid grind down and everything, especially with Indian Mound, Parmley, and Wakefield, the amount of damaged catchments, which have taken a lot of beating over the years and have never been replaced, will play part of that. But that money is earmarked and spoken for.
Yeah, you might as well follow up.
Follow up by Mr. Bonzo.
So, no, that's great. I appreciate you sharing it, about the Indian Mound project. With specifically to Cathedral Avenue and Shanmore Avenue, are we anticipating just using basically pretty much all city funds for that, or do we think that there'll be some grant money for Cathedral and Shanmore?
I'd have to refer to the massive paperwork on both to give you that direct answer, if you bear with me.
Yeah.
While I'm looking, I will, we get a lot of calls about the Indian Mound project specifically. It was mentioned last council, and what are we doing? Well, the COVID problem, and we're all tired of hearing it, set the governor's program back, and therefore set the release of the money, and then the release of the money to the funding body for us. So that's, I apologize, but we're all been with that. Okay, with specifically Cathedral and Shanmore, a little different work than what we're doing up on Indian Mound. It looks like all of the money is coming out of the grants, and I don't see, I know there's a bond sheet, promissory note that the auditor signed. I have to dig it up here, that for some of the street grants to repay over 20 years on a promissory note. But the breakdown I have here with what JMA sent me, it's not giving me what we're out of pocket. It looks like it's all covered by capital improvements, which would be us, but it's not going to go over or deplete the fund. If that helps you, I'd have to.
It does. That answers my question.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. So it would behoove me to mention I want to refer to Mr. Gabbert's, Councilman Gabbert's comments. 8 years ago or longer, as a candidate, I was told, repeatedly that Ward 4 residents and streets have been forgotten. And so I just want to personally thank Mr. Murphy and the administration for bringing this to the front of the list. And so I wanted to mention that this is, we have not been forgotten, and we have streets being paved, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Any further discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Yes, a question to the SSD, if I could. On the attachment, it talks about on Cathedral how this doesn't include curb cost. Is there, do we have some buffer in there if we do need to add curbs?
I think Clint and Mr. Godey from JMA will have to look at that. As the mayor indicated, this program's inception was some years ago, and the details were some years ago. We're just, so I have to, other than the letter I have from JMA currently, there could be other documentation I'll have to ask Mr. Godey and Ms. Vatter about on that very question, because that's the best I have right now for you.
Okay.
Unless the mayor has
another
something.
question. And I've brought this up in the past, just want to make sure, and I think you and I have even discussed this. Are we making sure that we are reaching out to Duke and Cincinnati Water and Sewer and all these others to make sure that they've got nothing coming up for 100 years on those streets unless it's an emergency, before we go through and spend all this money?
And I have discussed that, even so far with some of his counterparts at Public Works, specifically when they did Mark Bright. Looks all pretty, then Duke came along a year later. And they said, well, this is a grant we got to do it now or lose it. There's always, we just had a water main break on Highland, and we just paved Highland. It was our issue, it's a water main, but for the best intentions, we can ask, and Clint has a very good relationship with his comrades in Cincinnati, but sometimes things come up, and you just don't know. But I guarantee you, I don't want to see it happen. And Clint was really gritting his teeth when the water main popped down at 27 on Highland on brand-new pavement.
Right.
We look for it, we ask about it, but there's no guarantees today. We just can't get a guarantee.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Any further discussion? Any other questions? Motion on the floor by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Braden. Suspend the rules and have all three readings.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all three readings?
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for 2020 pavement improvements to Cathedral Avenue and Shanmore Avenue, JMA 4191, within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for 2020 paving improvements to Cathedral Avenue and Shanmore Avenue, JMA 4191, within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder for 2020 paving improvements to Cathedral Avenue and Shanmore Avenue, JMA 4191, within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that this ordinance be passed.
Motion by Mr. Braden. May I have a second? Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item K5, ordinance increasing metered automobile parking rates to $1 per hour and declare an emergency. Mr. Braden.
I'd like to make a motion that we suspend the rules and have all three readings.
Motion by Mr. Braden to suspend the rules, have all three readings. Mr. Kelch? Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard?
I think in our electronic packet, this was brought by the mayor's assistant, is that correct?
Second.
I think that's who requested the ordinance. It doesn't say it in our packet, but I thought I saw that in the electronic version that came across.
Yeah, it does have name Tom Perry,
Yeah.
and then Mr. Murphy okayed and signed it.
To
Mr. Gabbard?
follow up on that. I don't think I've ever had anybody request an ordinance that wasn't, like the public officials or anything like that, just to throw it out there. That's my only concern. Again, this is something that probably should have went through committee, one of the committees to, do some investigation on this, just to make sure that we're on track with this. I'm not trying to say that what Mr. Perry has done is not the case. Just, again, I think that we're getting outside of our lanes here and not going through the proper processes so we can get public input on things and make sure that we do things right. And that's my only concern on this.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Murphy, I saw your hand, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mayor, and Council. This question of meters has been bounced around for some time. We have a safety lane full and Public Works full of the ancient mechanical meters at our rate of 25 cents for an hour. We have an opportunity to receive 110 meters from the company down at Xavier X, Messer. They're taking those meters out. They bought what they call a cell head meter for them down there, that each meter is a cell head. And it's costing them $20,000 a year just to have them. So they're turned off. They want to give them to us. What we're looking at is an Android program where we're not going to use them as cell head meters. We're not paying $20,000 a year. You can still put coins in them. They are battery powered. We're using, what we want to propose is an Android program where you come along, with your app, you type in the meter number and your license plate, how much time you want. Our meter reader will come along with an Android phone, and meter 4 expired. He can write a ticket. Our meters are 25 cents for an hour. Reasonable and customary in the county is not 25 cents an hour. They're set, we have to get them to find out what they're set at. What did Xavier in Phase 1 set their meters at? And can we change them? That was the reason. The question of it came, was this ever an ordinance passed by this council, or was this an administrative fee set up by the administration? We're not asking for $4 an hour like some in Cincinnati. a reasonable and standard county fee for what an hour's worth of parking costs. But you can still put money in it. Now, when we get these meters and see, right now they're like very dark, they're not powered. And they have card readers. We're not going to use the card readers because that's another fee. This Android program Mr. Perry discovered will work for us. They're giving us the meters for free. And Mr. Zimmerman says we can adapt these meters, and they never pay for themselves, but it moves traffic. It's not a moneymaker, you know, the people to write the tickets have to go around, but it moves our traffic, especially when we get Montgomery Road redeveloped. We're also working on a program to rediscover Montgomery Road, reinvigorate Montgomery Road, and the meters will come into play. We just had the lots repaved at Station Avenue. We can install them there, as many as we have. What this saves for us is there's $15,000 in the budget for me to buy meters this year. Well, if we can, Mr. Bernie Sewer says, take them. If you don't want them, I'm throwing them away. We think this will work. It's saving the city some money. And this is the question of, was this ever an ordinance in council, or did the administration years ago set the meter fee? And no, the mechanical ones that we have will be great knickknacks for a bar. If the mother-in-law comes over, you put a quarter in it, they get to stay for the meter to read. But we can't use those. There's no way to make them mechanically function today in modern society. We know younger people will pay with an app, and our people that don't do that will put a coin in it, and at least we're turning the parking over for our businesses. So Mr. Perry questioned this, should I put it on? I said, well, we don't know if we need to. So, you know, we did ask for some ordinances from the meter reading, but since our meters are 19, well, they were here when I came on in 73, the same meters. I don't know if there was a councilmatic ordinance setting the fees, which have never changed, or was it set by the administration? So that was the reason to spur some discussion, and rightfully so by this body, is this something that should be in a council committee, or was it set by administration?
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mr. DiNardo, you had a question?
Yeah, I just had a few comments. First, thanks for the really good discussion.
Yeah.
It gave good background, and actually, I am glad it's on the agenda for us to discuss and hopefully vote on eventually, for that exact reason. We can let people know the rationalization behind why we're increasing and kind of the upgrade that it feels like it is. It's not just money for money, it's a bit of an upgrade. To your point, Mr. Gabbard, I don't think that this really falls into staying in our lanes or needing to do that, mostly because we could just do an introductory reading, have the discussion, exactly what you just did now. People are aware of it. I think rather than saying we're doing something wrong, by not putting it in committee, we might be potentially, I don't think we should, but potentially doing something wrong by having all three readings. We don't need to put everything in committee. We just need to be talking about it and give people a chance to go through first, second, third readings. At least that's how I understand it. So, and lastly, Tom Perry writing something, I definitely don't have a problem with it, and I don't think it's doing something wrong there either. He kind of came up with the idea, and he had the idea with the mayor, I think, like a month ago. And so I imagine he did all the research, and I imagine he's the person that kind of talked to you and gave you that, so he's probably the perfect person to be drafting it. It didn't come in front of us without having eyes on it. So maybe I'm saying you were implying too much, and I don't mean to, but it's just kind of like, I don't really have an issue with it for all those reasons I said.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Who had your hand over here? Response.
Just as a response, my concern on that is because they're not an elected official or a department head, then anybody just feels like they can submit an ordinance.
Well, Tom Perry's not anybody,
but he's not a department head, and he's not an elected official, and so that's the only thing. You're right. I'm sure that both of these guys had eyes on this. It should have came from one of them, is what I'm saying. We're talking about formalities, and when we're in a government body, that's what we have to look at, is the formality of it. As much as we dislike having to do those kind of things, that's what I'm looking at. That's the only thing. Again, not implications that anything's done wrong here. Just saying how it comes through and our processes, and we just have to make sure that we're doing processes right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, I'll echo Mr. DiNardo in the sense that I don't see an issue with Mr. Perry writing it. And I thought that Mr. Murphy kind of went above and beyond probably what he needed to by signing it, saying that he okayed it. And we were okay with Mr. Murphy in the previous ordinance submitting the request for the ordinance. So so I just want to say that I think that it would be fine for Mr. Perry to write up a ordinance request and for Mr. Murphy to sign it at the bottom. I mean, I feel like that, to me, it seems like a fine process, so. But either way, I just want to emphasize too, so if council members don't feel comfortable voting on something because they don't have enough time to review it or because it should go to committee, then I would say we just need to get motions to put, whoever's upset about it just needs to make a motion to put it in committee, or if they don't want to do all 3 readings, vote no on the readings. Like, I think it's pretty, there's definitely options for that, for anybody that feels like they're not comfortable with how things are going. And if enough people feel that way and we can't get things done, then obviously the process is going to go that way because it doesn't have enough votes.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think in my 2 cents would be Mr. Perry is the executive to the mayor, assistant, and I'm sure that he was in talks with the administration, Mr. Mayor and the Safety Service Director. I'm sure they're involved. So I kind of tend to agree with others that are saying that it's okay that Mr. Perry bring this to us. He did come to, he did ask, we talked about putting in a committee, and it was discussed, and for one reason or another, decided they didn't need to do that, and I support that. And another thing I have is $1 an hour. It's not very expensive at all. It's still not as much as Cincinnati, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. And 25 cents an hour doesn't seem, it's just, I think 25 cents to $1, it doesn't seem like a big deal. I understand it may seem like, but to me, it's not really a big deal. And also, our streets here in Norwood, if it's a problem, you can just pull around the corner, and there's parking right there close. So if it's an issue, we can pull right around the corner there. So there's several things at play, and I think this is something that we can support. It's been coming down the road here for a while, and we're getting free equipment, and I think that we should probably support this.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Any further discussion? Mr. Moore, had a comment?
I was on the question of who requests an ordinance. A department head and elected official can request an ordinance, and we're kind of obligated to draft one if we think it's legal. We may argue with you about it, that it's a dumb idea, but it's your call. So, for the department head. So, Tom Perry, not technically, but I think it's a question of how it comes. And so we've gotten requests from Brenda Osterday, for example. Hey, the mayor wants this. Hey, Joe wants this. Or can we get one of these? And it's if it's our feeling that it's on behalf of the department head, that's okay. I mean, I don't have a problem. I'll draft the ordinance. But you're right. There are, from my perspective, there are a limited number of people who can make me do something. So there are people that work for the city and they say, I want to do this. I want to change 911. I want to have this instead. There's a limited number of people that we're going to draft an ordinance for. And that's just as a practical matter. Now, we may also decide that's a really good idea. Let's draft it and send it from us, because we can do that too. So just on that kind of aspect, I think for, executive assistant to the mayor, it's one of those, that's one of those, if it's on behalf of the administration, then we're okay with that. If there was a sense that he's just decided it's a good idea, then that would be, well, we're going to run it past the department heads, or we're going to run it past the elected official and see what they think. So just wanted to comment on that from the people that get the request.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any further discussion? Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? A motion on the floor is by Mr. Braden, second by Mr. Kelch, to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all 3 readings, please?
Ordinance increasing metered automobile parking rates to $1 per hour and declaring an emergency. Ordinance increasing metered automobile parking rates to $1 per hour and declaring an emergency. Ordinance increasing metered automobile parking rates to $1 per hour and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Braden.
I'd like to make a motion that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden. May I have a second? Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item L, administrative reports. Mr. Mayor.
Just very briefly, I just want to clear up that, and I wrote a quick statement for a few people to understand this. Clearly, I can't say it any more clearly, that as the mayor, I am playing favorites to developers who commit investing over $100 million in the city of Norwood. I will work with them every day to try to make that move forward. I'll do it legally. I'll make sure they have the information they need, and I'll work with them as hard as I can to make things happen. Absolutely, I will play favorites to a person who does that. The same thing, in fact, I'm in favor and on the side of not only developers, but business owners and community members that invest their time, sweat, effort, and tears in the city of Norwood. I, as the mayor, absolutely am behind them 100%, and I'll do everything I can to make it easier for them to invest money in our community. I will play favorites for those people, absolutely. So that's really the biggest part of that discussion was, should the mayor be pushing those things forward? Absolutely. If I've got a council member that comes to me and says, hey, if we can do this, we can get a development going on, if somebody's going to bring $100 million into our community, are we not going to jump through hoops for them? Absolutely. Will we do it legally? And do we want to make sure that there's no problems with it? Absolutely. But as the mayor, I'm going to push. I'm going to push. And I've got a law director that's going to watch, and I've got community members, and I've got council members that are going to, but I'm going to be working to try to help them make things happen. We've got other smaller developments going on that are just really, I mean, the Fidelity Federal Building that's going on right there with Ventura Group is going to be incredible. It just, the work that they're doing right now, going through that, it's just going to change the whole landscape. And when I look at the city of Norwood right now, it raises chill bumps on my arms to think about how much is going on in the city right now. And if you're an investor and you didn't invest in the city a few years ago, shame on you, because this is the place to be, and it's happening right now. And so that's as brief as I can be. There's all sorts of progress being made. Murphy and Tom Perry and many of you are involved in that progress, and will continue. I will continue pushing that forward, absolutely. So that's my whole administrative report. Thank you very much. That's pretty brief.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Any questions for Mayor Schneider? Thank you, Mayor Schneider.
Thank you.
Moving on to item M, other requests to address council. First, we have Ms. Pamela Angel. Ms. Angel. Please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes to address council. Thank you.
Yes, my name's Pamela Angel. I'm at 5329 Hunter Avenue. I am here to address you guys to see what things can be done to the neighbor's house right next door. I am a homeowner. I've been a homeowner there for almost 26 years. And now it has come down to part of the building, part of the neighbor's roof of his house has come down and damaged my truck. I have a letter from him because I did not see the damage, but I have been contacting the city for 20 plus years. Let me hand this over to this side. Just a copy. I have been dealing with the issue for 20 plus years. And he's been summoned to court. and he doesn't show up, him or his sister. It's owned by Dwight and Linda Hahn. I have dealt with the building department, the health department, and everything else. I am a taxpayer. I cannot even use, I was told by the Norwood Police Department when I found out it damaged my truck. I was told by the Norwood Police Department that I shouldn't walk down my driveway because the front gutter is about ready to fall down. There are kids on my street that when my truck was in the driveway, they were allowed to turn around. That was as far as they were allowed to go. Okay, my truck is not in the driveway anymore. Right now, it's at the shop getting fixed. But what if these kids go down my driveway and that other part of that gutter falls down? It was the gutter and the fascia board, falls down and kills one of these kids. It's not going to be my fault. I have been complaining to the city, the building department has got a file. John Brennan was down there the other day, or last week, and they've got a file around this thick of issues of things going on with the house. I've got so many critters in the backyard, and I'm even getting mice in my basement. And I shouldn't have mice because I have cats in my house. But I'm finding remnants of mice, and I don't want my pets getting sick from mice, biting mice. Never in my almost 26 years of owning the house had mice in my basement. I'm just wondering, with me being a homeowner, what can I do? Because I can't use all of my property.
Mr. DeNardo.
I don't know if this is for you or you, Pam. You said it was, what level of the courts was the last summons at?
Please?
What level of the courts was the last summons at?
I'm not quite sure.
Okay. It'd be worth, maybe if we can check on that, it'd be worth finding out, because I know we had a near identical story earlier in the year. And although the building department and the health department had gone through their process, they found it was at the county court. Actually, it would have been nice if AFTAB was still here, because that was where they just kind of helped say, well, it's at this level, we can help coordinate with that level. So it'd be worth for us to find out what level it's at, so we can kind of help push it at that. Because if it's at the county court, I'm just trying to say that I don't think that the building inspector or the health inspector, in the case that we just had in Ward 2, can actually go do much more. But they can help influence at that county.
I'm not talking, eminent domain. Dwight is very nice. I cut his grass in the summertime and trim his bushes. Wintertime, he shovels my snow. Is there any way if we can get some volunteers together?
Oh, I see.
And just help him out?
I understand.
I feel bad for the man. He does have some mental issues.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Miss Angel, appreciate you coming here tonight. Miss Angel, she's at her wit's end. This is her father's truck. Her father passed away and left her this truck, and it's a very nice truck. And I know this is kind of irrelevant to the point, but it damaged the truck pretty good. And this is her driveway that it was parked in, and I feel bad that I want to help her as much as I can. And I asked her to come here tonight so that we could. I'm not sure exactly what we can do. I know our restrictions. I've been to the building department. They showed me the stack of infractions. They basically said they walked it over to the police department. They've summoned him to court. For some reason or another, he doesn't come. So I wanted her to come here tonight so we could plead for anyone else that has anything that may be smarter than me. What can we do for this lady to help her? I'm willing to help any way I can, and I would like other input on this problem tonight.
Mr. Kelch.
Well, I mean, I think this is more of something, she's probably looking for more of an immediate fix, immediate resolution, solution to the problem.
Immediate? I've been dealing with it for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're
So
looking
it's
for
not
something to happen.
immediate.
I'm saying you're looking for something to happen more immediate. But.
Whenever it possibly
Yeah.
can.
And what's the address for that address?
Their address is 5331 Hunter Avenue.
I got that. So what it feels like is she's looking for something to happen now, and I wish I had a better idea for something now, but I would like to say what we do have in the works at Stone Committee is a nuisance property ordinance, which will hold property owners accountable for things like this, a fine structure, summons to court, all those kind of things that will hold property owners accountable in more of a clear directional way than we have now. Right now, it's kind of up to this person, that department, to kind of streamline it into one thing, but that's not coming right away.
Right.
So if there is anybody we willing to volunteer to go over and take a look at it and kind of see what they can do, I'd be more likely able to give my time, depending if anybody wants to kind of coordinate that effort.
Quite a few years ago, I reached out to people working cooperatively to give him help. They needed to get a hold of his sister, Linda, who took off quite a few years ago after she got laid off. She took off, and it's just Dwight in the house. They need her income to put a new roof on, to fix the garage. The garage is about ready to fall down. And that's where the critters are coming from. But they cannot find her. The city knows where she is. They are sending her court orders. And I don't have an address for her, but the city knows where she's at. If there's any way we can contact her, it's like, hey, please listen to us. We're willing to help you. We've got people, we've got volunteers. I'd be willing to go over there and spend several hours a night and help him out. But
Ms. Angel, I think Mr. Bonso had a question.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you for coming. I know that our last correspondence, I think, on this was in 2017. And,
yes.
So at the time, it looked like the police were going to get involved to try to get the warrant, but they couldn't get the person to answer the door. And so, sorry that we have not connected since then on that. However, I think this kind of shows, though, it shouldn't be up to the property owner to have to go and try to find help for the neighboring property. At some point, there has to be responsibility on the property owners. And right now, all we have, and we're working on processes, so I appreciate Mr. Drace and Mr. Kelch's their work on the chronic nuisance ordinance. But right now, again, we only have that criminal path to go down, really. And I think there could be some condemnation stuff, but there's not a very good path other than the kind of criminal path to go after. And if you can't find the owner, and Linda's really it's Linda and Dwight that own it, but it's Linda that's listed as the mailing person. If you can't find them, and she's really the one that they need to find, it's always been an issue. And so at some point, you just have to issue fines and let it go on the property taxes and give the carrots for people to actually take action. However, on this one, it is a relatively sad story because, Dwight, I think, does what he can, but it really shouldn't be on you to have to come here tonight to try to find volunteers, to fix it. But I understand why you are because of how long it's taken. So, I would like to ask that maybe the Mr. Mayor, I don't know if the task force is still meeting, but I really think this is a great case for the task force to look at what options that we have to deal with this. The task force being the police chief, the fire chief, the building commissioner, health department, to see what options we have here, whether it be to try to find help for them or to, what kind of sticks we have as the city, because, I met Ms. Angel first in 2015. Like I said, this has been an issue, and it's been not necessarily ignored. There's just not tools that at least the previous administration knew how to use. So I would like to ask if we could. I don't know if you're willing to have them look at that, but I would hope that we can look at that further and see what we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. So there's multiple issues with this property, and we can go all the way around and, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way around this place. But her critical issue is that she cannot use her driveway. So I guess my plea here tonight is, and I don't know if this is appropriate or not, I'm 25 years self-employed here in Norwood. I've offered to help Miss Angel. She's a neighbor of mine. If there's anybody out there that want to donate some lumber, anybody that can help with, the cost of the wood or want to help fix this gutter board to allow Miss Angel to use her driveway, I would be willing to do the work and to supply the work if we can somehow maybe put a task force together and come up with the materials to do it. I'm willing to help, and if others are willing to help, contact me and we can talk to Miss Angel and help her anyway. The situation is that it's a brother and a sister. The sister is vacant. The brother has some sort of disability and he's not able to take care of the place. So they just need help, and that's kind of what we're here for, and I'm willing to help. So it's going to take collective people throughout to help, and if you're out there and you can help us, get a hold of us, and we'll help you, Miss Angel. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Mr. Murphy.
Mr. Murphy, had your hand up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mayor, and Council. The local Knights of Columbus chapter works through PWC to do this very task. What I've heard tonight, I think the problem is going to be is for them to get involved with permission from the owner.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
If PWC can be contacted, we Knights work through them. They do these projects, small jobs, and with Mr. Breeden's assistance, if it's a matter of a technicality that we need permission of the people living there, or do we have to help them for it to be done like Mr. Breeden suggests, do we need permission from the owner? Obviously, we've got some legal issues there. I did speak to the lady. I have seen the file. Property court is backed up, obviously due to COVID, and the cases are in this month that have been filed months and months and months ago, and the neighbors of a couple are really tired of getting no fix. So PWC, people working cooperatively, I believe they're down on Tennessee Avenue, they do have a process, and if there's a way for them to investigate this and get involved without an owner, then I think that would be the way to go, if Mr. Breeden would look into that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And the Knights of Columbus will step up and do the manual labor within reach. Obviously, they don't do roof shingles high up, but the stuff reachable with a ladder is doable. PWC would provide the materials. We would bring the tools. It'd be a community fix.
Absolutely.
And we could probably even talk to our local lumber company for an in-kind donation, possibly. I think they would possibly be up to that, but Mr. Moore could tell us if there's a way that we can do that through this body legally without somebody being a quote owner or agent or owner saying, oh, you shouldn't have done that, you didn't have our permission. So we're moving it forward, and I know the health and building departments have tried. I know I spoke with Mr. Breeden on the issue, and I surely empathize and understand what this lady's going through. So maybe we should look towards PWC or a group effort possibly.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you,
Braden?
Mr. Murphy. I appreciate those comments, and you continue to impress me. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you so much. It sounds like, so the owner is Linda and Dwight, so I think the owner aspect of getting permission is probably not going to be the issue. I think it sounded like what Ms. Angel said was that they have to verify income, not just of Dwight, but of Pamela, and so, or not Pamela, sorry, Linda, who's the one that's missing. So I would just say that if there are roadblocks that come up like that again, to just please let us all know, because I think that we could have multiple people probably reach out to PWC and try to get that kind of waived.
Thank you.
So if you do have issues, just let us know.
Thank you, Mr. Bonds.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Thank you, Ms. Angel. Next, Ms. Kristen James. You state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes to address council. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kirsten James. I am the Executive Director of Elevations Enrichment, better known as Elevations After School Enrichment Program here in Norwood. I reside at 1830 Hopkins Avenue. I just wanted to address council tonight to give you an update as to what we have been doing. We are entering into our 5th year of operation, being a blessing and a support to the youth of Norwood and to neighboring communities. And we are addressing the COVID-19 situation for our youth with remote learning. We are looking into remote tutoring. Just so those of you who do not know, we provide a 4-point program for youth. It includes tutoring, biblically based character building, and it also provides career exploration and life skills training for our youth. We provide a variety of field trips for our youth, taking them to every major venue in the city of Cincinnati that you can think of, with our partnership with Most Valuable Kids, MVK, which is also housed here in Norwood. So it exposes our youth to a variety of things, opening up their minds to a number of things in life so that they are not limited. So with that, we are going to continue our tutoring. Although we are practicing social distancing, we will do that virtually. And we are asking, I'm glad the mayor said what he said, and wanting to support businesses within the community, because we are about to start a fundraiser. We've done it before. We did not have the support of any of our council members there. It is a free event to partake in, but it is a mental health training, which is put on by SAMHSA, and it is a fundraiser for our organization. SAMHSA will bless our organization with funds for those who take part in it, and the class size is for 10 individuals at a time with social distancing and wearing masks, and it will be in person. And if you would like to participate, you can email me at James, KJAMES, ELEVATIONS, that's elevations, @gmail.com, kjames.elevations@gmail.com. If you'd like to take part, and this is for anyone in the community who would like to get some help, mental health training, to come out, it is free to take part in. But as you participate, our organization will be blessed with some funds to continue our operations. Also, we are asking for the support of the city as we are moving forward in the planning for a drive-in, to continue our efforts in supporting programming in the community, to bless our families here in this community. And also, I want to introduce a couple of our young ladies who partake in our program. We are open to K through 12 youth, pre-K through 12 grade youth. So this is Sunny Renee. She is my daughter. She's 8 years old. And this is one of our team leaders. This is Cheyenne. And Cheyenne is a wonderful young lady. She is going into the high school, correct? She's going to the high school this year. And both of them have been with us from the onset of our program. I want to thank Mr. Gabbard, who has come out and supported us previously this year, and also blessed us with a donation. We thank you very much, Mr. Gabbard, for your support. I also have a couple of our board members on teleconference here tonight, and I'd like to introduce them quickly. The first person I want to introduce is Melody Wesley. Melody, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Melody, can you please tell everyone hi, can you hear me, Melody?
Yes, I can.
Can you please tell everyone what your occupation is, Melody?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time, Kirsten?
Can you please tell everyone what your occupation is, please?
Yes, ma'am, school counselor, 17 years.
She is a school counselor of 17 years. And our other board member that's on the line is Deborah Samuels, who is a grant writer. Deborah, are you there?
Yes, Sister Kirsten, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Deborah, can you tell me what some of the positions you hold in the state of Ohio, please?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deborah Samuels. I'm an award-winning grant writer, And currently, I work with the Governor's Office of Faith-Based Initiatives in a way to help our organizations, specifically nonprofits.
Hold on, Deborah,
Can you hear me?
can you speak up a little bit louder, please? She works for the Governor's Office in Faith-Based Initiatives.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was just saying that I currently work with the Governor's Office of Faith-Based Initiatives to help nonprofit organizations get the funding that they need from the state of Ohio.
Okay. Thank you very much, Deborah. We appreciate you being on board. We also have Eric King, who is an attorney who operates in the state of Ohio. He is an attorney, and we are glad to have all of these professionals on board with us to support our program and our organization. And last but not least, our community liaison and our board chair, which is Pastor Sonny James, who is also on our board. So I wanted to introduce you all to our board, just to set the record straight. And we're looking forward to your support. We're asking for the support of the city to partake in the mental health piece, and also with the drive-in and our remote learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Mr. DiNardo had a
Yeah, I
question.
just had a quick question.
Yes.
For the drive-in theater night, I know last time when this was first brought up, it was kind of in the works. Do you have a target date in mind?
We're still working on some things with that, so it's still a work in progress right now. So we will definitely keep you posted and keep you, up to date on what we're looking at.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Mrs. Yvonne Collins. Mrs. Collins, please come forward. Give us your name, address, and you have 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Yvonne Collins, and I own the property at 3811 South Madison Avenue here in the city of Norwood. Before I tell you what I was coming to address with you, I have to tell you what happened on my way here. I was coming up South Jefferson, and I noticed 3 people in front of this house, and I thought they were the homeowners. And so I said to the people, I said, "Do you guys live there?" And they said, "No, we're looking to purchase the house." So there was the realtor and the couple. And the man was a Jewish man, I could tell by the object on his head, that he was a Jewish man. And he said that was his wife. And then I said, "Well, welcome to the community, welcome, And so I went on to explain the reason why I stopped was because down here, I'm known as the sheriff in that part of town. Just kidding. But I said, well, welcome. And they said, "Well, we have a question. Are the roads all this bad?" And I said, "It's funny that you asked that because our mayor has made it a point to try to get the roads fixed. And I wish he would start with the South Madisons, the South Jeffersons, and definitely Duck Creek, a Villa Place. We've got a lot going on down there." And that's what they asked me. It was just so weird. I was coming here, and then I told them, I said, "Well, I'm on my way to council, so I'll be sure to send you a shout out, neighbors." And so I wanted to keep my word to them that they are looking to buy a house here in the city, and hopefully we can get the street repairs over there. So that was, I didn't want to forget to say that and shout them out. The reason why I was here tonight, and some of you might be glad about this, or some of you might have really wanted to hear it. I was going to give you some floetry. And some of my floetry tonight was going to be very hard. And the title of it was called, but I forgot it at home. So I'll bring it the next 2 weeks. I know, I got here and I was like, oh, you forgot your talking points. But the title of it was called, It's a Massacre. And I'm one to talk about the uncomfortable things that we said we need to talk about. And I was going to talk about black on black crime. It's here. It's real. It's on our face. And it's coming to Norwood. We don't get a grip on it. You're all aware of the kidnappings, the robberies, what Xavier students go through. But there's a lot going on down on Duck Creek, in that area down in there. There's a lot. And I'm one, if I see it, I do something and I say something to our children. So unfortunately, the ones I've had to speak to have been young black males. But I've never once wavered in the saying, what y'all doing? You can't congregate down here. I have no problem. Say it a lot, all the time. Every day. Because it's happening with our young black males. They did the robbery of the Xavier students. They kidnapped that girl. So my floetry was going to speak to them and what they're doing to each other. It's a massacre. And to simply say, stop the violence, it's not enough. I forgot my floetry. I'll try to bring it in a couple weeks when I come back. But I want to challenge Norwood. As the mayor said, we open for business. And it's popping, and I like it. But we got to get real with our black youth. And we got to get a handle on it. You're talking about new businesses, new residents. And it's okay to have this discussion. It's not uncomfortable for me. I have them every day. I see kids all the time. One time I had to go get the police to make a kid apologize to me. A little black boy cussed me out because I told him to stop fighting. And I told him, you're going to apologize to me. And then I saw a white man the other day who owns a business here in Norwood. We were talking. He's a Muslim. And he said, for the first time in his life in this city, he said he's seen 5 to 6 black kids on bikes. And he said it's just weird because you never see that in all my years, and we own the house and I own the business. I've never seen that in Norwood. I said, what were they doing? He said, no, they just rode to the corner on their bikes. Just kind of hung out on the corner right there. And I said, you didn't say anything to him? He said, no, I didn't. They weren't doing anything. I didn't say anything to him. And I said, at that time, I wish the Norwood police officer would have rode by, stopped. It just simply said, hey guys, who's your mom? Where do you live? I just want to know, just in case I need to talk to him, if I see you doing something. If I see you out of order, just want to know who your mom is. Who should I call? That would have put a little fear that somebody's watching them. Because, yeah, there's 6 to 5 black kids riding on their bikes. But the kids do what kids do. They look for stuff to get into. So, I challenge you as a city to talk about this uncomfortable subject as we become more diverse. That's my wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Collins. Pastor Sonny James.
Pastor Sonny James, 1830 Hopkins Avenue. And I'm going to do something a little bit different tonight because although we esteem and honor all of you elected officials, really all of our voices are committed and dedicated to the people that really run this community, and those are the residents. I'm so honored when children come up to me and say, "Hey, you're that guy I seen on TV." And they'll come up and give me a hug. Well, tonight I'm not so excited to be before you because tonight I have the unfortunate responsibility to show when people say, "Well, what is he always ranting and raving about? What is he always fussing about?" You know, when you have 1 million people standing for the same cause, even if that cause isn't fair or doesn't treat people fair, it's hard for one little old voice to stand up and get heard or be heard. But I want to share a reality when we say status quo and people say, "What does it look like?" I'll give you an example. We have great people here in Norwood. I love this community. I want everybody in my community to be safe. Whether they're black, white, Hispanic, or whatever. And I fight for the rights of those who oftentimes can't fight for themselves. But 2 weeks ago tonight, at the end of council, I had shared with council members, including our mayor, that we wanted to bring in a drive-in movie theater to Norwood. And tonight I hear my wonderful mayor say things like, "Yes, I will support those developers." Well, I made a note and said that, what about our community developers? What about our community mentors? They need that same priority. And after the meeting, my wonderful mayor said, "Well, what about this Elevations group? Where's their board? Do they have a board? Have they met?" But yet tonight, I'm listening to conversations say, "Hey, we need to do whatever we need to do to help push your agenda through." Residents, all I'm saying is, it's time that everybody get treated fairly and get that same urge for declaring an emergency. And instead of coming forth when you hear things like economic inclusion and acting as though you're afraid of people who are different, who have maybe been ousted by your peers, instead of partnering with that mindset, why not have those same residents say, "Hey, I have an idea." And what if they don't have an attorney on their board? What if they don't have professionals on their board? Shouldn't we have the mindset to say, "Hey, can I meet with you and help you get things in order?" So I want to say, I've been very frustrated because all we do is try to help. And I'll give you an example. We had a resident stand tonight and say she needs help with the neighbor's yard. Instantly, I told her tomorrow my contractors will be on site at that residence. I will call Mr. Braden, and my contractors will begin working and servicing that wonderful resident. I don't need an ordinance. All I need is a heart. Mr. Mayor and others, it is time that we work through the status quo and not present more of it. If you hear of someone having a great idea, don't bring up status quo and roadblocks. Why not ask, "Hey, can I come by your house tomorrow, eat a burrito with you, and see what I can do to make you efficient, to make you effective, and to help further along your agenda. I love this community. I love the people in Norwood. I'm not going anywhere, though. And that means there are lots of good people who stand for status quo. And you don't have to look far to find who you will be facing. You're looking at that brother man from the motherland right here before you. Doesn't matter who you are. Let's get together. Like Mr. Braden brought this wonderful resident. I don't need a business group behind me. I need a heart and a few dollars. And finally, I want to leave you with this. The rumor and reputation is, residents call me all the time with people coming forward. Even after I talk with the mayor, 2-3 days later, residents calling, coming by my house, saying, oh my God, I heard this and I heard that. Do you notice who you don't see here tonight? My wonderful 19-year-old son. Because of some of the nasty comments, so discouraged now. Not feeling connected to his peers. Shame on us, guys. What is he supposed to do? Stand before you and say, no, I'm not going to be the first African-American police officer. I'm going to be a heroin addict. I'm going to be a bum on the street. So when we have positive people coming forth, stop the nonsense and just support them. Say a positive word to them. Encourage them. And then, Mr. Mayor, don't misconstrue economic inclusion by having a 19-year-old in the police head up a program that was initiated by a minority-based organization. Just support it as it is. So I thank God for those of you who are working hard. I really, really do. I want us to work together as a family, guys. That's all I'm asking. And finally, because I know my time is up, I have not asked this city for 1 penny personally. Just the opposite. I have offered to bring finances to the table. I have not asked for 1 penny. So stop telling people I'm trying to get money. The money that I seek is for other people. Elevations, the director for 5 years has not drawn 1 penny salary. The children pay $0 to participate, and I help fund it. I have not asked for any money. So please stop lying. The money we ask for is for other people, like residents that need work done, not for Pastor James. God bless you all. Let's just love each other. That's all I'm begging each and every one of you. If you have any questions, call me at 513-487-8843 or email me at pastorsonnyjames@gmail.com. That's SONNYJAMES. I will be reaching out to the law director to address some issues that I feel are pertinent, of things that personally have affected myself and my family, and we will address that. I believe he to be a wonderful man. I've apologized to him for my misinterpretations of him, and I stand behind that, and we will address that in another forum. God bless you all, and keep supporting everybody. Peace.
Thank you, Pastor James. That's all the requests that we had this evening. Moving on to item N, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business this evening?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bonzo.
Actually, I do have something. So previously, we had talked about the citywide street sale, and we had talked about potentially, we decided that we weren't going to do one in May or June, but now we're getting to August, and the questions come up from a resident to me, are we planning on doing one in either September or October? And so I told this resident I would bring it up to the council to see if there was any conversation about it, if we wanted to talk about it. So I will do that now. So I'll yield.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Mr. Dracy.
Yeah, we were supposed to have one the first week of August, but because of the mayor or the governor's order, I didn't want to bring it up at the last council meeting, and we kind of I guess, squash that one, just kind of fall in line with the COVID stuff from the governor. We do have one at the beginning of September as well. I will be bringing that to council's attention next council to get the resolution together to waive the fees for that, just as they did the year before.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess through the chair. Do we know the date of that you're planning on doing?
It's the first weekend of September. Let me get my calendar here. It's going to be the 7th, the weekend of the 5th, 6th, and 7th, I believe. 4th, 5th, and 6th, I believe.
Okay. So it'll be, you're saying that the ordinance that you're going to bring forward is going to be for Friday, September 4th, and Saturday, September 5th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you said you'll have it at the next council meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
So that way we've got plenty of time to get it out. And, I mean, we can start advertising now because in the next council meeting, I'll have the resolution ready to go to waive the fees for that citywide sale.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Bonsall? Any other unfinished business? Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have some things I've been working on for a few weeks now. There's been some issues on Carthage Avenue. It's been brought to my attention about a few complaints about rats on Carthage Avenue, and I just wanted to bring that to the attention of whoever's having that issue. I called MSD because it was known, it was brought up that sometimes they trap and they bait for these rats if there's a problem, in the sewers. So I called MSD and I spoke to a very nice lady, Casey Bray, and she informed me that if she wanted to know the proof of where the rats were coming from and if they were coming from the sewers, the waste sewers, and how do you determine that? But she also assured me that if you can determine that you have an issue and they are coming from the waste sewers, that you can call Miss Bray at 352-4995, and you can report that issue. And she told me that she would be willing to help with that, but she basically has to have assurance that they're coming from the sewers. So we talked about baiting, and she said that sometimes they do that. They have to have reassurance that they're coming from the sewers. So I want to put that out there. That's the first thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden.
Again,
else?
thank you. One more. Thank you, Mr. President. So the other issue I'd like to speak, I got a phone call and been talking about, it's people's cleaning their yards up, and landscapers throughout the city are taking their debris and waste and they're blowing it onto the streets. And I've talked to Public Works, someone who works with them, and they want to have a meeting because this is evidently an issue throughout the city. And particularly at White Castles today, their landscapers were cleaning the land and area, and it was on Montgomery Road. I have pictures if anybody'd like to see them. And Montgomery Road was just littered with mulch and debris. So evidently this is an issue throughout the city, and I'd just like to urge anyone out there cleaning their yard or our landscapers working throughout the city to be mindful of our storm sewers. And when you blow that into the street, if you would clean it up, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Mr. President. Potentially just a question through the chair to the previous council member. Could you by chance provide or state what evidence did they want from you that it was actually coming from the sewer? How did they want just an attestation that you saw one coming out of a manhole? Is that what do they want the residents to do to prove that it's coming out of the sewer?
As soon as thank you for that question, Mr. Bonsall. As soon as I asked her if there's some way she could help with the residents that are contacting me with this issue, she wanted proof of these animals coming from the storm sewers. She wanted to know how I knew they were coming from the storm sewers. If they were, I don't want to get too into detail, but if they're coming up through the toilet evidently that's an issue that happens. She named a few things, but she wanted proof that these were coming from the storm sewers. And if you can get that, I think we can get help with that. So this is what I was told. This is preliminary discussions, and I will help anyone who has this problem further the cause.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Bonds?
Yeah, and just to follow up, so like, I'll just say that, I mean, I do have a contact at MSD that could probably help with this too. So if you do run into like roadblocks with this, like as you're trying to get help for that resident, just let me know and we can jointly reach out together and
Sure, thank you.
to another contact if that helps. So.
Thank you again, Mr. Bonzo. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Anyone else have any unfinished business? Thank you. We'll move on to item O, new business. Any new business before council? Mr. Gabbard?
I'd like to call a Economic Development Committee meeting. I've already spoke with Mr. Bonzo. He is free next Wednesday or Thursday. Mr. Thompson is unavailable. Mr. DiNardo, are you available either Wednesday or Thursday evening?
18 or 19?
Yes.
18's better. Or 20
Tuesday?
rather.
Huh? 20, the Thursday?
Sure.
I'd like to call an Economic Development Committee meeting for Thursday, the 20th, with the subjects of the U.S. playing card and starting conversations there as far as PUD and TIF. And then also, I would like to place in the committee the topic of the CDBG, that's the grant, and how we can possibly look at utilizing some of those funds for our City Hall block.
What time?
7:30 good?
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Tracy, you have your hand up, sir?
Yeah, I'd like to see if members of the Housing, Health, Housing, and Public Safety Committee would be able to have a meeting on Monday, the 17th, to discuss the chronic nuisance ordinance. I've been putting a lot of hours into this, and I'm sorry that I couldn't get one this week, guys.
Yeah.
What time?
5 o'clock or later.
6:30? Yeah. Hopefully my doctor will be finished by 5.
Yeah, I can.
Not on Monday.
Yeah, I can.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Kelch? All right, cool.
Thank you,
So
Mr.
6:30, council chambers?
17th.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is my last item on that I have tonight. I just wanted to reassure some other people that I'm in contact with that the issue of speeding on Quabbin Avenue, several discussions and things that are being kicked around, and I just don't want them, because I know that there are talks and the neighbors are talking to each other, and I wanted to reach out and let them know that we are with them, we are looking at it, and Mr. Murphy has came up with several things, and we're in discussions. So I wanted to bring that up and let the people on Quabbin Avenue know that it's an issue and we are discussing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Any other new business? Mr. Gabbard?
Actually, along with the Economic Development Committee meeting, the other list I'd like to put in there would be the sign ordinance, and I actually want to put in not regards to the ordinance that we passed earlier, but with conversation about same type of signage, so it would be in regards to the code 132107, prohibited signs. I'd like to place that in economic development as well.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Anyone else? Mr. DiNardo?
Yep. So this is new business, but it's not for any particular council action. But it's worth noting that Joseph Volkswagen has purchased a little bit ago, over a year ago, a plot of land between Lexington and was now Wasson Way. The west side touches Montgomery Road and the east side kind of bumps up against what is now the Duke parking lot. So the previously unused area, but what makes it, I guess, significant to folks around that area in Ward 2 is that it's right along, the southern side is right along Wasson Way. When it was purchased, it's worth noting that it's currently properly zoned for that Joseph Volkswagen to go there. In my opinion, the Joseph group, the family has made a concerted effort to engage with leadership and residents along for what that was focused on that southern border along the Wasson Way. I also believe none of that engagement is really required, but I think it's awesome, and it's actually kind of goes in line with a lot of other major businesses, kind of getting a habit or a pattern of engagement with our leadership. So they talk to me, they talk to the mayor, they're talking to the building department, they're talking to some folks that actually live in the streets around Spencer, Ellesmere, Floral. So, and what they're specifically talking about, in addition to just showing the plans ahead of their PUD application, is also, they're saying, you know, what do you want us to see to show a little of that partnership, that olive branch, that get you excited about the fact that we're locating ourselves along a really busy area, that Wasson Way walking path, bike path, which I don't think any of us thought it would be as much of a huge success as it's been. So it's been really cool, and I just think it's worth celebrating kind of that sentiment or that tone of a business moving in there and trying their best to get something that kind of goes with the flow of the area. Again, they don't have to do this, but they are trying to ask for your suggestions, and you can funnel them through me for what can they do within reason for a new business to kind of help show that southern face a little bit better with the Wasson Way. Some of the suggestions that came out just to kind of start the percolating going, a bike servicing station, a map and messaging board, water bubblers, something that has to do with addressing Lexington Avenue. Don't really know exactly what that means, but it's part of the discussion that I want to have with them. But yeah, it's just letting you guys know they are trying to talk to our leadership and get ahead of, you know, making that southern bank a little bit more attractive for the folks in the Wasson Way.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo.
Yeah.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. So I kind of just wanted to respond to this because there's new information that came out today that I was just able to get to the mayor's office and the building department that I found. But I'd actually was able to pull the PUD ordinance for that lot. And in that PUD ordinance, it actually prohibits certain uses, and I'm gonna read the uses that might be relevant that it prohibits. It prohibits fuel and recharging stations. It prohibits automotive service and minor repair. It prohibits automotive truck rental agency, and prohibits the sale of new vehicles at that PUD. And I'll get you this as soon as this meeting's over. I literally just got this today. So I guess to me, I mean, you know, the intent, and this was passed in 2014. I mean, I wasn't on council at this point. I think Mr. Braden's the only one that is here that was on council at that time. Or maybe Mr. Moore. But anyways, long story short about it is, you know, I mean, the ordinance is there, so I don't know, I would just say that the zoning, I don't think, right now, allows it, and so that would have to be changed. And frankly, I think there needs to be a much bigger discussion. I mean, if that's going to be changed, I mean, I can't think of I mean, there are worse uses. I mean, I would say that it's not a super great use, in my opinion, of, you have the pedestrian biking trail right there that's going to eventually extend to Avondale and UC, and it's going to extend the other way all the way to Hyde Park. I guess I don't understand why I don't personally understand why I'd be super excited about seeing a car lot, like I said, on that when there could be so much more. And the ordinance specifically says too, that, you know, the goal is, with this lot is to permit, you know, maximum economic development potential, high quality architecture, and pedestrian oriented design. And then it says the placement of parking between any building or structure in the right of way of Montgomery Road is hereby prohibited. So, I mean, that's the ordinance and the zoning that's in place right now. And like I said, I don't personally see, I would hope that we could encourage more discussion on this. Maybe this needs to go to economic development too, but I think I don't want Norwood to make a mistake of allowing something like this and it being there for the next 40 or 50 years when it doesn't, I guess, fit in with kind of the streetscape that we already have right there. So I think there could be like so much better potential. Yeah, so that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Mr. DiNardo.
Yep, I was forwarded that, my neighbor's on the planning commission, and so I saw the PDF. I think that that's part of the process that's going to happen regardless. They're going to submit their application. And so I think plenty of discussion will be had on whether it's actually going to happen and what that'll look like. That, they're going to do the application. We're going to go through, the planning commission is going to go through their approval process. We're going to see that, whatever changes to that will come from the application, we're going to see that in our body. So I'm kind of like, I know that's just, we're going to have a ton of chat about that. I was just letting folks know that there's no action today, other than if there's things that they want to help get ahead on just the soft stuff, that they're hoping to kind of hear about it. So, yeah, I saw it. They're going to go through the application, and it's an area that was kind of unused for quite a long time, although I haven't been around before 2013. So.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Any further new business? Mr. Kelch?
Thank you, Mr. President. It was brought to my attention by several people that in the treasurer's office, we have like very few employees working, and there's also an open job listing, I guess, for an employee to be hired that hasn't been done, and this is creating kind of a delay when we're writing checks and getting checks signed for things being done in the city. And through the Lisa K. Memorial Park, I've faced this myself with some of the contractors doing some of the work there. Is there anything that we can do to encourage Mr. Maloney to continue to do that part of his job and hire people, make sure his office is running smoothly? I guess I would be asking maybe Mr. Mayor or the law director there.
Mr. Mayor?
I don't have any comments on how the treasurer's office would run. That's sort of his task. He's an elected official, as I am. I don't run his office, nor have any say over how his office is staffed or ran.
What do we do? Just, we wait? We just don't pay people on time? I mean, it's kind of a joke.
Want me to answer that?
Yes, sir.
Was that a question to me?
I mean, it was a question and a statement. It's
I mean,
kind
I
of a
would have
joke that we can't pay people
if I
on
was a
time.
council member, I would have a discussion with the treasurer and discuss with him what he could do to make it better if you're having complaints. That's what I would do. I would call and talk to the treasurer.
Mr. Gabbard?
I was going to make the same suggestion and just ask if you've reached out to the treasurer to speak with him about it. I know that they've had some illness in there. And that's also a department that's pretty tough to get people to work in, much less stay in. And we've got employees all over our city that they started in the tax department, but they weren't there long because that's not a fun job. So I would encourage you to reach out to Mr. Maloney and have a conversation with him and see, what he says.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Any further new business? No further new business. We'll move on to communications. Item P1, letter from Mayor Schneider regarding the Tax Incentive Review Council. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated July 28, 2020, to Mr. Ken Miracle, President of Council and member of Norwood City Council, regarding the Tax Incentive Review Board. Dear Mr. President and members of council, this letter is to notify council members that I am appointing Tom Perry and Vicki Gary to the Hamilton County Tax Incentive Review Committee. This appointment is for a one-year term beginning August 1st, 2020. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the letter be received and filed.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall. Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yeah.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
All members present, voting aye, motion passes. Item P2, letter from Auditor's Office regarding July monthly financial reports. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated August 4th, 2020, Norwood City Council. Dear council members, this letter is to let you know that the July monthly financial reports were emailed to each council member on August 4th. If you have not received said email, please let me know so that I can verify your email address and also get you a copy of the reports. Sincerely, Kelly Brown, Account Clerk, Auditor's Office.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the letter be received and filed.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to receive and file. May I have a second? Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item P3, letter from Mayor Schneider regarding mayor's court fines.
Letter dated August 5th of 2020. Regards to, excuse me, Dear Mr. Ken Miracle, President, members of Norwood City Council, regarding mayor's court fines. Enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of July 2020. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor of Norwood.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the letter be received and filed.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to receive and file. May I have a second? Mr. Braden.
I second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item P4, letter from Planning Commission regarding public hearing for playing card PUD.
Interoffice memorandum, City of Norwood to City Council from the Planning Commission, dated August 6th of 2020, regarding playing card partners, 4590 Beach Street preliminary plan unit development. On August 5th, 2020, the Norwood Planning Commission held a public hearing reviewing the playing card partners preliminary planned unit development plan. During this meeting, the applicant made an oral request to amend the application to allow a modification to the original 2014 U.S. Playing Cards Planned Unit Development Ordinance to add residential apartments and townhomes as an allowable use. Planning Commission recommended approval of the preliminary plan application and the amendment to the PUD ordinance to permit residential apartments and townhomes. Per Section 1155-14 of the Norwood Zoning Code, the recommendations of the Planning Commission are to be forwarded to the Norwood City Council for public hearings and final action. It is requested that a public hearing be set no earlier than 30 days from the receipt of this memorandum.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a point of clarity or question to the Clerk of Council. Have we picked a date yet? Have we advertised a date yet, or are you waiting on council action?
We did pick a date. I apologize, let me look at my calendar real quick. It has been, we requested that the meeting be put into the Cincinnati Enquirer. That's supposed to run next week. I know that the Secretary Clerk was working on getting the postcards sent out, and it's for the second meeting in September.
Okay, that sounds good. So I think that's probably the next full meeting. We've had conversations via email on this, so so I'd like to make a motion that we, I guess that we schedule the public hearing for the 22nd and that we receive and file the letter.
So motion by Mr. Bonsall to schedule the meeting for September 22nd, receive and file the letter. Mr. Gabbard.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gabbard. Any discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. And so this, I was going to make a request and kind of just get maybe advice on exactly how we need to handle this regarding this public hearing. I think it's important that the public and the full council is as informed as possible going into that date on the 22nd. I think that there's some timelines that need to be met, and so I think that the applicants are hoping that we can, just get that approved somewhere around that date so that they can just move forward with hiring their architect to create their final plan. So with that being said, I'd like to ask, and potentially just maybe the advice of my fellow council member, Mr. Gabbard. I know that we're having the PUD kind of discussion at the Economic Development Committee, but I'd like to ask potentially, do you think it'd be appropriate for us to invite them to come into our next council meeting to just kind of give the full council and the public, just a 10 or 15-minute presentation on what they actually want to do. So that way the public still has another 28 days from that point to think about it, digest it, maybe come to that next council meeting to talk to us about it, so that when we do the public hearing on the 22nd of September, we'll all be pretty fully informed by that point, and we won't have any kind of big surprises. Does that make sense?
So you were planning on having them here on September 8th? Mr. Gabbard?
He's asking if, and I've actually already extended an invitation for them to come to the Economic Development Committee meeting, so we can start these conversations, and then that way they can give, obviously starting out, just give a whole total overview of everything. And I agree with Mr. Bonzel. That way people are starting to, at least see what's going on, what they're looking for, and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Mr. Bonzel?
Yes, so my question, I guess, and that's fantastic. No, I think it's great, and I appreciate that. I think it's going to be great. So they'll probably be talking to us for a half hour, 45 minutes longer. It's a big deal. The question would be for here is, does this council, for the 2 meetings before the public hearing, which would be the next meeting, do we potentially want to just invite them in, maybe give it just a smaller summary, just so that the public can hear it, the full council can hear that?
So you're referring to the 8th, correct?
Or the 25th.
The 25th of August. Just let us, add them to the agenda to come in and kind of give us a quick 10-minute presentation. And that way the public at home, they can watch the Economic Development Committee too, but it gives them a good summation, just as much information as possible. If so, after this vote, I can just make a motion if you need it to add them to the next agenda. Or you can do it as president of council if you want.
We'll put it on the August 25th.
Mr. President?
Mr. Moore?
I'll say it's always an excellent idea, and I've always recommended to developers, if you have a public hearing, come to the meetings before that, because otherwise you're at the public hearing and somebody asks a question or they think about something and we don't want to vote on it tonight. But I would add to that request that council get copies of the paper that's involved with this, the plans, the actual plans with the footprints and all the rest of that went to the Planning Commission. The council get their copies in time for that meeting when PLK comes to council the first time.
Will do. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Gabbard?
Just a point of clarity for me. We have to plan this and we have to give a 30-day notice for this. Can we not go by when we received it? It's a question through to the law director, just as a point of clarity. Can we not go by when we received it, which was on the 7th, and then we could do, the first council meeting in September to, as the mayor said, move this along. But does it have to be from tonight when we actually vote on it? We can't go by time-stamped receiving the letter.
Mr. Moore?
The council, you can, and the last council did this, you want to be safe, have a motion, somebody make a motion to say, this is the way it should always run, that as soon as the president of council as soon as the clerk's office gets the letter from the planning commission that says something like this, the council's going to have a hearing, that the president of council can then pick the date it's going to be, instead of waiting potentially 2 weeks for a council meeting to set the date. But the 30 days is not from when council gets the letter. The 30 days is how long notice has to be published. So it has to be at least 30 days after it's in the Inquirer, after it actually runs in the Inquirer, after the postcards go out. So part of that is it takes a little time to do all that, to send postcards to everybody within, whatever perimeter it is, and to take care of that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any further discussion? The motion is by Mr. Bonzel, second by Mr. Gabbard, to set the public hearing date September 22nd, to receive and file the letter. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Item Q, all members are present. Move on to item R, adjournment. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Bonzo to adjourn. Mr. Braden.
Second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, we're adjourned.